Hello, young guitar readers. This is Steve Vai again. For what is it, 25 years now I've been saying hello to you? Well, hello again. And I also want to say to you, thank you. And thank you for all the support through the years. Some of you are new players that are maybe discovering what I do, and some of you have been around for a while. But I live a charmed life. I really am blessed. It's like I won the lottery. And it is such an honor to be able to have the opportunity to be in your magazine and for you to still be interested in what I do. Stick with it because it gets better. Yeah, Sound Current was a project I had done with the Rochester Orchestra years ago. And that's a college orchestra in upstate New York. Sound Theories was the music from the performances I did with the Metropole Orchestra in Holland. And it was a wonderful concert and a wonderful event. And it consisted of two parts. First part was music that I had composed for the orchestra and a little rock band ensemble that did not include me playing with the orchestra. The second half was about an hour of music of me playing the guitar with the orchestra. So that was really the difference. And we did 5 beautiful shows, and they were all recorded, and I cut together various takes to create the 2 albums, the double CD that's now Sound Theories. And there will be a DVD coming out that is the recording of the last night of the performances in Holland. Well, you know, I was always fascinated with the way music looked on paper. You know, it always just looked beautiful to me. And I wanted to understand it, and I wanted to know how to write it. And I studied it. Even when I was a kid, when most people were like drawing stick figures and stuff, I was writing notes, you know. And eventually I learned what they meant and how to use them and how to, you know, utilize them to make music and to make people work together. So I always kept up my compositional studies, and I had various opportunities through the years to compose music, and I did. I probably composed 1,000% more music than was actually ever performed. But then, in 2002, I got together with Coda Kloot from the NPS in Holland, which is a national public radio station. And he puts on these cultural events in Holland where he chooses a musician that he thinks has you know, various skills and can create an interesting concert with the orchestra and what they normally do. So he chose me, he approached me to do one of these, and I was all over it because it gave me an opportunity to actually hear what I was writing. So that's how the concerts came about, really. Well, you know, obviously you need to kind of follow the thing that you're interested in, and I love the guitar, and I know you do because you're reading Young Guitar, and you're probably a young guitar player. But if you ever want to have your music performed by other instruments, you got to know how to write it so that they can understand it, because when it comes to an orchestra, you can't show them what to play. You can work with other people who you can show, and then they can write it down and give it to the orchestra, but that's called an orchestrator, you know. But for me, I like to write the music, and it's really not that difficult. You just have to first of all understand, you know, what notes are. That, you know, this is an E, and that it's here on the staff, you know. And then you have to understand each instrument, how to write for that instrument. And that's just, you know, you got to know that a violin plays, this is its lowest note, this is its highest note, this is how you write for, you know, this is what it means when you put an accent on it, you know. And then if you're going to write for a harp, you have to study it. You have to understand how wide they can reach. You got to understand how the pedals work, because a harp has pedals, and when they step on one pedal, all of the notes will either go sharp or flat according to the pedal they step on. So then you have to understand how to write for the harp. You know, it's a study. It's a study. And I've always been fascinated with it, and I've studied it my whole life, you know. So it's really just a means. Understanding how to write music for an orchestra is just a means to an end. Great composers don't think about it. They, they don't think, they don't have to think about the limitations because they already know them. They use what they know to make this in here real. They don't write for the sake of just because they understand how to. That's just a part of it. My music is kind of, a lot of it's very compositional in nature, and when I listen to it, when I'm creating it, a lot of times I'm thinking of a much bigger picture in my head than what I'm capable of recording. Because recording with a lot of instruments is very expensive, obviously, So I do use a lot of samples and stuff sometimes to create an orchestra sound. But I'm not looking for my music to sound like a conventional orchestra. I mean, that's been done, I'm just looking at it in more of like colors and forms and stuff. So when it came time to choose the music that I was going to play with the orchestra, it was very difficult because there was so much that I wanted to do. But I had to limit it, obviously. So songs like Liberty, for instance, which is on Passion and Warfare, is a very obvious kind of a choice because it's a very compositional, grandiose kind of a song, and it works very well with an orchestra. Picking something like the Attitude song is a little more challenging because, the Attitude song is all about guitars. And getting a guitar to work with an orchestra is very difficult because they're very different. An orchestra instrument is, it's an organic sound. It's an ambient sound that's created with wood or brass that you blow into, or it's an ambient, organic kind of a production of sound, whereas a guitar is all electronic. It's an electronic sound. So when the frequencies mesh, it can be a disaster. You got to be really careful and figure out how to make each instrument have its own space. Well, with Kill the Guy with the Ball, I wanted to create an interesting, fun, entertaining visual. So when I come out, I told the orchestra, when I come out, I'm going to go to the string section first, and I'm going to play something, and they don't know what I'm going to play. And then they have to mimic it one time. And then I'm going to do it again, and when they mimic what I play, they have to keep repeating it. And I just explained this to them. It's written in the score too, So I did I did something like something like that, And then they went and then when they were repeating it, they kept repeating. And then I went to the woodwinds, and I went, something like that, and they went. So now you got the strings and the woodwinds, and then I think it was the brass. I forget, it was strings, woodwind, strings, woodwinds, brass, percussion, So then by the end of it, you've got all of these sections doing all these weird things, all these different things. And then we break into Kill the Guy with the Ball. And it was different every night. That was the fun thing. It's tuned down a whole step, but this guitar is tuned normally, so there's a... That's the basic theme, And, I just came up with that from experimenting with a wrist pattern, So in my mind, when I hear that, I know immediately how I'd like an orchestra to sound when they play it. And there's other sections that are very bizarre, you know. So if you listen to the record, you get to hear what that sounds like with an orchestra. It's pretty powerful. And it's a similar thing. It's sort of a reflection of a rhythmic thing I used to fool around with, you know. It's kind of a, oops, sorry, wait a minute. So it was kind of like a rhythm technique I was working on, and then answers came out of it, you know. And then, you know, and then there's a melody that goes with it, you know. And then I just orchestrated that with the orchestra, you know. And then there's this great little motif. And, you know, that comes in and out, and that was fun to orchestrate because you can put harmonies on it. And it's a simple melody, you know. But then when you have like horns doing it, and you know, it adds a nice little texture. You know, a song like that just really lends itself to the air and the space of an orchestra. And it turned out really well. I was very happy with the way it came out. And it's a very sweet kind of a melody piece that uses a sustainer. It's all in the touch, you know. It's the sustainer, and you got to have the right volume, and it's all in this little action with the vibrato bar. And it's in the vibrato. It's making it speak. You know, to make this song work, you gotta become every note. You gotta be inside of every single note. You know. Whoops. Because there's superimposed rhythms, you know, it's like a 7/8 feel on top of 4/4. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, bop, 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 bop. That's 7/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, bop, bop, bop. But it's on top of a 4/4 time singer, so it's like. Which is very cool. It gives it that swanky kind of an attitude. Getting an orchestra to understand how that's supposed to feel is a little bit of a challenge, but they did a great job. And there's some really funny riffs in that song. Like, you know, it goes. And now you got to get that to sound right with an orchestra, so you got to pick the right instruments, that can do that kind of a phrasing, And as the river goes, it's something that's played on a harmonic on the guitar. So how do you get that, you got to get a violin to do that. It's very difficult, So, there's each riff represents a different challenge, and you can't just pick any instrument to play them. You got to pick the instrument that has the capabilities of making the riff speak appropriately. And it's a beautiful kind of a melody, and I remember when I first wrote it, it was just one of those things where I just sat down. I felt that something was happening, and I just sat down and picked up a guitar and just went. I just started singing this melody and playing these chord changes. It's like, no, that's not right. And then you find the right chord, and then you create the song. And it's a beautiful piece to have an orchestra play, so I opted to have the first part of the song performed just by the orchestra. And the oboe is a beautiful instrument to do it on. So in the arrangement for the orchestra, the melody in the beginning is played specifically without me, with the orchestra alone. So. That was just me fooling around, making making the guitar kind of talk, like having this conversation between two aliens. Because the human voice is just notes, really, You just got to be a little nuts to do that stuff, though, I guess. I don't know. It's natural to me. know, it's just a trick. Yeah, in the second CD, Shadows and Sparks, all of that material has, you know, it's never was recorded before. Some of it was written quite a while ago. Bledsoe was the only thing that was released, but really, Bledsoe, the main part of the song was orchestrated, but then I composed another whole section. So the song is really twice as long, or very, very different than the original recording. But all of that music, you know, lended itself very much to, you know, an orchestra. And you know, when you hear the word orchestra, a lot of people immediately identify with a particular sound. Mozart, Beethoven, maybe something else if their ear has been listening to that. I enjoy the orchestra, and I always have, but I'm a rock musician. And I've never felt compelled to just write music for a particular situation, such as just an orchestra, you know. So with sound theories, I've tried to incorporate the sound of a rock band ensemble with an orchestra, or with orchestra instruments, you know, to create something that's very different than anything you've heard before. And, you know, it's difficult for an artist to sit and talk about their music sometimes, because it's our job to have to sell it. But trying to remove myself from it and not sound too pretentious in explaining to you what I had in mind with this music, it was really to present a contemporary style of music with an orchestra. Because throughout the years, obviously, various orchestral trends or genres have come and gone. Baroque, Renaissance, you know, Romantic, contemporary. And, you know, in the contemporary movement, there's been a lot of experimentation. And very atonal music has been produced. Untempered music, you know, music that requires electronics and stuff like that. But no one has ever really brought a rock band. I mean, it's been done, obviously, you know, where they take a rock band and they apply it to an orchestra. And sometimes it's done better than others, you know. A lot of times a popular rock metal group will take their songs and just apply an orchestra to it. But really it's very unchallenging in a sense, because it's just the orchestra sawing away at low notes or, you know, stuff like that. This is not what that is at all. You know, this has nothing to do with that stuff. This is compositions put together specifically for the marriage of a rock band and an orchestra, where they intertwine, you know. In that regards, it sounds very interesting to me. It sounds like I feel as though I've come across something that kind of really worked, and I enjoy listening to it, and I enjoy the approach. And you know, I don't claim that it's superior to anything else, you know, but it really is it is very different, you know. It's different than any kind of mixture of that genre that I've heard before. So for that, maybe it's worth a listen. I love playing the guitar. I really do, obviously. But I really like to compose and sit back and just listen to it. You know, when I'm playing the guitar with the orchestra, I have to think about what I'm doing, you know. So I was very fortunate, because I had opportunities with this project to compose music without me, but still have a little rock band. There's a great guitar player in the Metropole Orchestra, Peter Tolinas, and he did, on the second disc, he did all the guitar work. There's not much, but it's very composed stuff. But that's where I think the idea of the merging and the marriage of the orchestra and the and the rock band really shines. Disc 1, The Aching Hunger, was orchestrations of songs of mine from the past. And you know, those songs were constructed with certain things in mind. Guitar, rock band, you know what I mean? So they lean more towards a rock band sensibility. On the second disc, the music is more compositional for an orchestra with the rock band supporting it. So they're very different. I mean, when you listen to something like Helios and Vesta, you know, it's a very dense piece of music. As a matter of fact, it's one of the few pieces of music that I ever listened to that really scared me. You know, and that was all compositional with an orchestral frame of mind. When the rock band comes in, it's not like, oh, here's the rock band. It just blends, you know. It was a very different approach for both CDs. I think whenever a person goes to compose or create something, it has to start with a thought. It has to have an idea behind it. That's logical, because it's impossible for anything to happen without it first being thought of. And that's one of the real fun things about doing something artistic. The first place it takes place is in your mind, and there's very few limitations. So one of my favorite times in creating a piece of music is the very beginning, when there's nothing there. Because then you can just imagine the world, you know. And I'll pick one track, for instance, which is Shadows and Sparks. It's a long piece of music. It's like 17 or 18 minutes. It's actually two pieces of music, Shadows and Sparks. But the idea came very, very quickly. You know, the whole thing was envisioned in an instant. I wanted to start it. I had the idea to create a piece of music that had elements of song, because I pictured it as the first piece of music in the concert. So I wanted to start with an empty stage and have various instruments come up, and I was going to have them sitting in the audience. Like the horn section would be sitting in one part of the audience, the string section would be sitting in another, and then as the music evolved, these people would stand up and start playing and then walk towards the stage as they were playing. But there would always be one lone virtuoso violinist that is the main communicator with the orchestra. So if you listen to this piece, and on top of that, I wanted to have each section perform a piece of music, a motif, that was a piece of music from one of my songs in the past. Okay, so that was the idea. Now, that idea came that fast. It takes a long time to make it happen. Years, you know. But the fun part was writing it, you know. So at first I thought, I'm going to walk out on stage, and I'm going to conduct the audience, and then I'm going to start conducting to an empty stage, you know, and then I'm going to hand the baton over to the conductor, and he's going to start conducting to the empty stage, and then he's going to have the percussionist come out, and the percussionists are going to start with a little, very, very slight little motif, right? And that motif is going to create a foundation for the main section of the melody to Shadows and Sparks. Okay, so then I had to think, I want the percussionist to play something that's from my catalog. So on Alive in an Ultra World, there's a piece called Babushka, and it has a percussion solo that I wrote. Bump, you know, whatever. So I wrote that, and that's what the percussionists play. And then they take a little piece of that and they create the chorus section for Shadows and Sparks, and they keep repeating it. Then there's a break, and the pianos and the harp come out, and they play a little something, and then they play a piece called Whispering a Prayer. So these are the Shadows, because they're pieces from my past. And then when they play over the C section, the main section of Shadows and Sparks, they maintain a motif from Whispering a Prayer. Bring, 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 ding, ding, bring, bring, bring. So you hear that, right? And then they stop, and the woodwinds. Now remember how cool it would have been if these sections were sitting in the audience and they were standing up. We couldn't arrange that to do that, you know, because it was too logistically impossible with microphones, and nobody wanted to do something that weird, you know. So then they play a piece called a little section of a song called Lucky Charms, you know, which is from the Ultrasound, and then that repeats in the C section, you know, as a motif. So now you got the percussion and the strings, the percussion and the harp and piano and the woodwinds building this section, and then that continues, and you got the horns come in, and there's a fire in the house. So by the end, on the chorus section of that was the idea, you know. And it goes on, and it builds, and you know, that you asked how I wrote a particular piece, and that's one of them. So for the recordings with the Metropoles, I really only use 2 guitars. I use my trusty old Evo, which is the guitar I've been using for many, many years, and it's a gem. I call it Evo. And then I use this guitar here, which I've been using for quite a long time also, Flo, and it's a gem, and the difference is that Flo has a sustainer. And that's really the only 2 guitars. Oh wait, there was another one which was a blue gem that I had as a backup, and a black one too. But they were gems. I don't have them here. I gave them away like I always do. This one is a very interesting guitar that I just got, and I was very impressed with, because they have this concept that the guitar is kind of a screwed up instrument, and it is. And usually when you tune the guitar to a particular chord and you go to play another chord, it's out of tune. Yeah, usually if you have a guitar and you play an A chord, it's very hard to get it in tune. And if you can get it in tune, you have to tune the guitar not by the open strings, you have to tune it to the chord, because if you tune it to the open strings, it's not going to be in tune. It's just the nature of the way notes work and their overtones. And then if you do get it in tune with an A, when you play a D chord, it's not going to be in tune. Never happens. You could never pick up a guitar and play an A chord and a D chord and have them be in tune. But you can on this guitar. And that's specifically because of these people who engineered that the difference between the distance of the notes on the guitar really creates the overtones, you know, and in order for the guitar to be in tune for all of these chords that usually are out of tune a little bit when you play them, you know, they devise this way of bending the frets, you know. And it really works. I'm shocked, you know, and also because of the way that the notes resonate, there's a lot of sustain in it too, so you can... You know, I don't have a sustainer or anything. It's just the guitar sings, you know. So I just got this and I'm experimenting with it. I'm going to have necks made for all my guitars because it's really brilliant. So this is what I may be using this on tour, you know. And then I also have the new Anniversary guitar, which I don't seem to have with me right now. I had this made because I'm always looking to create something that's bizarre. This is an electric acoustic neck and an electric guitar. So it's, well, I can't really plug it in because it's 2 inputs.
Oh, okay.
So I'll just explain it. So you've got an electric guitar on this neck and an acoustic guitar on this neck. I don't think it's ever been done, but what am I here for, right? So I plan on trying to create a piece of music, which I haven't started yet, that actually uses both necks, you know, and has this kind of an action to it. If I can pull it off, I'll bring it on tour with me and we'll have a double neck party. If not, it'll stay home in its case. So that's basically what I'm using. Well, I would say this. People are attracted to the guitar for different reasons. A lot of times it's because they see somebody they like and they're inspired. And that's good. But it's also good to try to follow what you're interested in. That might be different. You might like the blues, but you don't want to sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan, you know? So if you like the idea of an orchestra, you know, you should pursue it. If you don't, then don't. You know, there's no rules. don't let what people think. I mean, if I was to always try to be accepted or do what other people expect from you, then, you know, I wouldn't have done this project. You know, I wouldn't play the way I play, you know. So it's okay to be inspired, but really, always, every day, try to find something that's really yourself on the instrument. Thanks. Bye.